Our weekly share deals either with the mitzvah of the weekly parsha or in Yonah D'Yoma. And today we have an opportunity to do both. So this week's parsha is Parsha Semoy, and one of the mitzvahs in this week's parsha is Sefiras Weimer, and we are in the midst of Yemei Sefira. We just passed the first third. And in this week's parsha, Usfartam Lachem Machas HaShabbos Meyom Aviyachem Esoyim Aratunufo Sheva Shabbosos Tmima Istihi. And on every year Parsha Semoy, I usually talk about Sefiras Weimer, one of the sugyas in Sefiras Weimer. And today we will speak about women. Women in Sefiras Weimer. Are they exempt or are they B'chlal HaChiyuv? The Rambam Tmidin V'Musafin Perek Zayin Alochov Dalet clearly says Noshim P'turos Sefiras Weimer, but it doesn't explain why, and the Kesef Mishnah does. Just like any other mitzvah Seisha Zman Geroma, it is dependent on time from Pesach to Shavuos, and therefore Noshim are potur. Mogen Avraham says the same, Tov Peites Sif Koten Aleph. But the Ramban has a different opinion. And everybody struggles to understand the Ramban. In the Mishnah Kedushin, the Flamadaladu, and the Mishnah says various different examples, mitzvahs that are Zman Groma and others that are Ein Zman Groma. The Ramban says Tona V'Shayar. It's not a full list. There are more that are not mentioned and enumerated in this Mishnah. One of the examples he gives for Tona V'Shayar is Sefiras Weimer, and the Ramban clearly says Sefiras Weimer Ein Hazman Geroma, and women are Chayev b'Sefiras Weimer. Doesn't explain why. So I will suggest 4 different approaches, 3 of the Achronim and 1 which is of my own, Lanias Daiti. Avnei Nezer was a gewaldige Chadsha. Shim Pei Dalet Shuvas Orachaim, he says. Just like the Gemara Dashans, Kol Sheyeshno Bebaltoich Al Chometz Yeshno Bekum Achor Matzah. And a woman, Lachera, would be potter from Matzah because there's a mitzvah Seisha Zman Groma. But anyone that is chayiv in the lav, Baltoich Al Chometz, is also chayiv in Kum Achor Matzah. And some Rishonim say this is not only Matzah. It includes Moror, it includes Sipi Yasiz Messiah, it includes all the mitzvahs say of Pesach. Avnei Nezer says maybe Sefiras Weimer is also included because it starts off the second day Pesach. The Avnei Nezer is extremely unreasonable for 2 different reasons. Number 1, it doesn't fit in with the Ramban, because the Ramban doesn't just give us a halacha that Noshim are chayav b'Sefiras Weimer. He clearly explains why, and he says it's a mitzvah seisha ein hazman geroma. According to the Avnei Nezer, it is man groma, but gzeres hakost of kol sheyeshno bebaltoichel yeshno bekum achoil. And the other reason it's unreasonable is Sefiras Weimer is not a Pesach dike mitzvah. It's clear. It doesn't have anything to do with Pesach. It's coincidental. 6 out of the 49 days of Sefira happen to be Pesach. Miyom Aviyachem Esoyim Eratniva, second day Pesach. This entire svora, Kol Sheyeshno Bebaltoich Al Chometz Yeshno Bekum Achor Matzah, refers only to the mitzvahs of a Leila Seder. It definitely has nothing to do with Sefiras Weimer. Divrei Malkiel was one of the greatest poskim in Lithuania, contemporary of the Avnei Nezer. Reb Malkiel Tenenbaum, who was the Rav of Lomzha, great sefer, Chelik Gimel Siman Hai. He writes, Borur, that is a Tos Atfus in the Ramban, he couldn't mean Sefiras Weimer. It doesn't make sense. It's all about the Buchazetzer. I don't know if everybody knows what the Buchazetzer is, but he is to blame whenever we don't really understand something. So anyway, Divrei Malkiel suggests, maybe, perhaps. In the original text of the Ramban, it was written Samech Ayin. And what the Ramban had in mind is Seder Avoido. Avoid is a karbonis. And the Buchazetzer tried to understand, what does Samech Ayin mean? Probably Sefiras Weimer. And he opened the Rosh Tevis and he wrote Sefiras Weimer. Or maybe it was Mem Ayin. And what the Ramban had in mind is Matnas Aniyim. And somehow the Mem got confused with the Samech and it morphed into Sefiras Weimer. I don't like this pshat. There are more writes in your day, Reishai and Tesif Aleph. Ein lahagiya shum sefer min asvora, elo berayis gemuros. And the Bir Agro on the spot uses very harsh language. Avere gedoyle letaken kol sefer misvora, only with rayas. So the fact that we don't understand the Ramban doesn't justify saying there is no such Ramban. It's in the Ramban. And if it wasn't the Ramban for 600 years, it should stay as is. So the fact that we don't understand the Ramban can't bring us to a conclusion that there is no such Ramban. So what does the Ramban mean? Two greats for him, Divrei Cheskel and Rav Fishel Perlo. And I like to give a brief bio when I mention Gedolei Yisrael. There are two different Divrei Cheskels. One is very well known in the Hasidic world, Rav Cheskel Meshinava, the great son of the Divrei Chaim. He is known as the Divrei Yecheskel. But there's a Litvish Divrei Yecheskel, Rav Cheskel Bornstein, Talmud of Rav Chaim Briska, Marbetz Torah and Slabotka. Magnificent Sefer, Divrei Yecheskel Semememhei. His contemporary, Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Perlo, was a tremendous Ilui in Varsha, in Warsaw, in Poland. He wasn't a Klei Kodesh, he wasn't a Rashiv, he wasn't a Rav, he wasn't a Dayan, but he was one of the Gedolim of the generation. And he actually wrote the Sefer HaMitzvos Lerasag. And whenever I mention Rav Fishel Perlo, I say, Mechaber Sefer HaMitzvos Lerasag. What do you mean? Rabbeinu Sadigun didn't really write a Sefer HaMitzvos. He was a Ish Eshkolos, and many of the early Gedolim Sfarad, he was everything. He was the greatest philosopher, Jewish philosopher of his age. And the only one that surpassed him was the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. Emunis V'Deas Lerasag is a classic. And the Rambam Shoyev from the Rabbeinu Sadigun. He was the greatest Rashiv of his time, towards the end of Tkufas HaGaonim. He was also a Paitan, a Mishorer. And he wrote a song on the Taryag Mitzvahs, dedicating 2 or 3 words, maximum aligned to every mitzvah. And Official Bello took apart the song and analyzed it. And he structured Sefer HaMitzvahs Lerasag. And in his introduction, in his Mavoi, he says the same svara as the Divrei Cheskel. So what do they say? What they say is this. Sefiras Haomer is not Zaman Groma, because it is not dictated by time. It is dictated by the Korban Omer. It is the Korban that is Toli Bizman, not the Sefira. Technically, Sefira is dependent on time. Yes, there is a clear time frame from second day Pesach to Shavuos. But it is indirect. Sefiras Haomer is totally b'korban omer. It is the korban that is time dependent, not the Sefira. So the Ramban's Chiddush is not every mitzvah that is dependent on a certain time frame would be defined as mitzvah sasei shazman garama. According to the Ramban, according to this svara, it's a beautiful observation. Mitzvah sasei shazman garama, not mitzvah sasei shetoloi bizman. Theoretically, there could be a mitzvah that we cannot perform, and we don't have to perform only in a certain time. But if it's only indirectly dictated by time, that is not Zman Grama. And that is the explanation of those great two Gedolim, why Sefiras Haomer is Ein Zman Grama and Noshem Archayev. Sefira Toli B'Korban, Korban Toli B'Zman. So what is actually the Ramban's opinion? There was Zocher to Mimachav and Adas Rambam. Because some 30-odd years ago, a new Sefer was written, Oitze Shittas HaKadmonim on Bava Kama, and it is our first time that we were zeicha to see the tshuva of Reb Moshe Chalava. And today this tshuva was printed in many, many forms. Reb Moshe Chalava was the son of the Maharam Chalava, a Talmud of the Ramban. His father's name was Reb Menachem, and we have a Sefer Maharam Chalava al Psochim. So Reb Moshe Chalava quotes his father, I heard from my father, in the name of the Ramban, Sefiras Haomer is Ein Azman Grama, because it depends on the korban, and the korban depends on this man. So tanuach datchem, Rabbi Cheskel Bornstein, Rabbi Yerucham Fischel Pella, you're right. And we apologize to the Divra Malkiel. Your assumption was a mistake. Borur shezatos atfus. No. The Ramban meant what he said, and he said what he meant, and it's written in the Ramban. Sefiras Haomer as ein azman grama. Why? Beautiful explanation. I myself said a different svara. And to me, my svara is extremely appealing, as always. I definitely am biased, and I'm negeh b'davar. But I do want to share my opinion with you, my svara, even though the Ramban doesn't accept my svara. He does accept the svara of the Divrei Cheskel and official Pero. So what would be my approach? It's a bit of amkus and dakus. It's nuanced. What I say is this. All the mitzvahs aseshas mangrom are of the same essence. They're acts and deeds, which theoretically a person could do any time. But it is din Torah that the mitzvahs are to be performed in this time and none other. You could wear tzitzis by day or by night, technically, but the mitzvah is by day and not by night. You could blow shofar on Purim, shakel your lulav on Yom Kippur, eat matzah Rosh Hashanah, during Dalet Koises Lag BaOmer. You could, but that's not the mitzvah. So Zman Groma is any mitzvah that theoretically you could be Makayim any time, even Kiddush. What's the mitzvah of Kiddush? Loima devorim sheyesh bem kedushas Shabbos. You could do that on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, any other day. But the mitzvah is to say Kiddush Shabbos and no other day. Serious women, technically you cannot perform any other time. It's a technicality. Because the mitzvah is to count not days, but certain days, specific days. The mitzvah is to count the days from Tet Zayin to Hey Sivan. If you could find them any other time, Tamaz, Ov, Elul, Tisha, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, look for them. If you find them, count them. But you can't count days when they don't exist, when they're not around. So Sefiras Haomer, just theoretically, technically, you cannot perform this mitzvah any other time of the year. That is not Zman Groma. Zman Groma means it's a gzeres hakos of this is the time and no other. Sefiras Haomer, the problem is not with the time, the problem is with the cheftzah. So why didn't all the others say this svara if it's so poshut? Because obviously it's not so poshut. And I'll explain the difference between my feeling and all the others. All the other Achronim understood the mitzvah is to count the days. Days are days. Days are all the same. And that's why it says Zman Groma. The Torah says when to count the days and when you don't need to count the days. My feeling is no. Every day is like no other. Every day has its own significance. Every day is this day and no other day. And therefore the mitzvah is to count these days and no others. And you can only to count days when they're here, not when they're elsewhere. A person has a big heap, a pile of gems, different gems, and they're all mixed up. He has diamonds, sapphires, rubies, emeralds, leshem, shvoi, v'achlama. So we could just count the gems, but he wants to count diamonds. So he needs to sift them through and pick out the diamonds. Some days are diamonds, others are emeralds, others are rubies, others are sapphires. Every day is different. And the Torah wants us to count these days and no others. From Tet Zayin to Hey Sivan. It is impossible, technically impossible, to count these days when they don't exist, when they're not here. That is not defined Zman Groma. That would be my approach. But as I explained, the Ramban likes the other pshat more than my pshat. My pshat seems to appeal to me, but who am I to say? And in Minchas Osher, Kloli HaMitzvah Simen Chof Ches, I dealt with various different mitzvahs that are similar to Sefiras Haomer, especially according to the Ramban's Svara. Divrei Yecheskel, Rabbi Yerucham, Fisher Perlo. Bikurim. הם מביאים ביקורים אלה מעצרת עד חנוכה. Big discussion on is Bikurim Zman Groma or not? Probably not. Because there's a reason why it's Eretz at Chanukah. It's not essentially about Zman, it's about phenomena. That is when the best fruit blossoms. That is when, from those fruit, you need to bring Bikurim. It's not the time, but the fruit. How about Kiddush Levona? Mogen Avraham Tov Chovov says Kiddush Levona no Shomar Pota because it's Zman Groma. Reb Shlomo Kluger on the spot disagrees. And Reb Shlomo Kluger's argument is an appealing one. He says, what is the essence of the mitzvah Kiddush Levona? Haroya Levona b'chadusha tzarich levarech. It's not the mitzvah that is dependent on time. It's the phenomena. Halavona mischadeshes b'tchilas hachodesh. If Yeshua ben Nun would decide once again, Shemesh begivoin doim, v'yoreach be'emek ayoloin, he would stop the entire system, all the rotations out there, and the Levana would be Meschadish at the end of the month. We'll say Kiddush Levana at the end of the month. It is not time that is the fundamental factor. It is phenomena. And the fact is, Ein halavosha alavona mitchadeshes, ela betchilas hachodesh. So technically, yes, Kiddush Levana you could only perform in a certain time frame, but it's not about time, it's about the phenomena. Mogen Avraham l'shitosai. Mogen Avraham paskins Sefiras Haomer is Zman Groma. Is it because, according to Mogen Avraham and the Rambam, Sefiras Haomer doesn't depend on the korban, but rather on the time? Not necessarily. Mogen Avraham paskins any mitzvah that we're mechuyev in a certain time and not in another is Zman Groma, regardless of the reasoning, regardless of the question, why is that? L'shitosai hu adin hu atam b'kiddush levona. Reb Shlomo Kluger could have argued, I have the Ramban on my side. Kiddush levona depends on phenomena, not essentially on time. Berchas Hachamo. Once in 28 years we have this mitzvah, this bracha. When the system, the solar system, is exactly aligned as the way it was b'shosha nitlu ama'ores b'sheshes yemei bereishis. That happens once in 28 years. Chuvas Chasam Sofer Chaim Nunvav says it's Zman Groma. Reb Shileb Diskin Paskin many years ago in Yerushalayim, no Shemar Chayev. Didn't explain why. Same. It is the phenomenon that comes to be once in 28 years. It's not time. It's phenomenon. So we mentioned Bikurim, Berchas Hachama, Kiddush Levona, in a similar way, Sefiras Haomer. So, should a woman count and make a brocha? It depends, Sephardi or Ashkenazi. Siman Yud Zayin regarding tzitzis. That's a machlokes Rashi and Bali Tosfos, the Rambam in the Rosh. Beis Yosef follows in the footsteps of the Rambam as always, and he paskins women should not make a brocha mitzvah Zman Groma. Beis Yosef follows in the footsteps of the Ramo and Rashi as always, and they could, and that is the minhag. Ashkenazi women say a brocha and dalad mina, Mansukas, Sephardim don't. The same would apply to Sefiras Haomer. But comes along the Ben Ish Chai and some other Mekabolim and they say no. Sefiras Haomer is different because the Zohar says Sefiras Haomer is a mitzvah that is derived from Duchra, not from Nugba. From man, not from woman, and therefore woman should not say Sefiras Haomer. I'm not a Mekubal, only Asik ben Astoris, but I wonder. The Mogen Avraham was a maven in Kabbalah, and the Mogen Avraham more than any other Poisik brought Kisvei Ha'ari Zal into the Beis Medrash. Not derech gagos chatzeros vekarfifen, but derech beis shar, bekoved rav. What the Beis Yosef did with the Zohar, the Mogen Avraham did with the Ari. And the Mogen Avraham in that very same Sif Kotan Aleph quotes the Zohar. He brings the Zohar. And nevertheless he says, women should count Svira, v'kiblu aleim chayva. So obviously the Mogen Avraham didn't see any contradiction between the Zohar and Minhag Neshois Ashkenaz to count with a bruch. And I really don't understand. Yes, so the Zohar has a different explanation. Duchra and Nukba. That doesn't mean the halacha is any different. Anybody familiar with the Zohar knows that there are many different sources. The Zohar gives a different approach, a different interpretation to the very same halacha that we find in Nigla, in Bavli, or in Yerushalmi. Just for instance, Shavorim Trua. The Gemara Sefiras Shona says, we don't know exactly what a Trua is. Genuch Egonach Yiluli Yolal. The Zohar says, he laughs about the Bavlim, the Babylonians. They don't know what they're talking about. They think that Shavorim Trua is because of a suffix. No, it's Dina Kashya and Dina Rafia. And the Zohar goes on and he says the Bavlim don't even know why we have 2 days Rosh Hashanah. They think it's Sveika Diyom. It's not Sveika Diyom. Dina Kashya, Dina Rafia. Does that change the din? Not at all. So the Zohar gives an additional explanation why women are exempt from Svias Oime. Does that mean the din is different? Not at all. It's just a different explanation why Noshim are potter. But it's not a reason that there's anything wrong with a woman counting Svias Oime. Because the Mogen Avraham quotes the Zohar, and he nevertheless says women should say Svias Oime. And therefore I don't think there's any reason Ashkenazi women shouldn't say Svias Oime. Should they make a bracha? Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotan Gimel writes, no. Women should not make a bracha Svias Oime. Now why not? Korev Levada, they're going to make a mistake somewhere down the line. Another reason, they don't understand what they're saying. I think both reasons are not relevant today. Do they understand what they're saying? Most of them understand very, very well. And that's all, every woman is fluent in Lashon Kodesh. I think in America as well. Daughters, wives that went to the Yankov system. So they understand very well. And there's no reason to say they're probably going to make a mistake. We don't even know what the Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Shloim quotes Shulchan Shloim. What do they mean they're going to make a mistake? They don't say they're going to forget, but make a mistake. What type of mistake? Obviously what they mean is they're going to confuse the date. They're not going to say the right night. But today, everybody can know exactly what night it is, Meleles Esfira. All you need is a phone or a computer. Most homes, there's a luach kir, a calendar on the wall. Why would there be a reason to say woman will make a mistake? So my psak is this. Every woman should keep record of her track record. A year, 2, 3, 4 years ago, did you finish the Sfira, or you got stuck somewhere in the middle and you forgot a night? So if based on your own personal experience, you're probably not going to finish the Sfira, then it's better not to start with a brocha at all. But if based on past experience, you probably will finish the Sfira, there's no reason not to say a brocha. And that was my psak for my daughters, for my late wife, Zechron Levrocha, and for anybody that asks me. It's based entirely on your track record and your own personal experience. And why do we say, if a woman probably will forget, she shouldn't start counting at all? Shulchan Aruch is choshesh to the famous shitta of the Halachas Gedolos. If you skipped one night, you lost it. So machlokes and achronim, are the brochas lemafreya brocha levatola, or is only from now on? You can't count 30 if you don't have 29. And you can't count 40 if you don't have 39. But all the days you counted without skipping are okay. And it's not a brocha levatola lemafreya. Some achronim say it is a brocha levatola lemafreya. And in Minchas Osher Chelik Gimel Moedim, I dealt with this question. We don't have time now to get into all the specifics, but If it is a brocha levatora lemafreya, it would be recommended for women. Why get into a suffix brocha levatora? Men don't have the option not to say a brocha. Berachas mitzvah is a chiyuv, and if you perform any mitzvah without saying the brocha, it's an aveira. You're mevatla mitzvah derabon, chiyuv derabon. But women aren't mechuyev to say a brocha because they're not even mechuyev to be mekayim the mitzvah, and therefore, why say a brocha and move into dangerous terrain if it's very likely you're going to skip a night? All the brochas you did say might become brochas levatora. So I think in that case, it should be recommended not to say a brocha. So today we discussed a very specific halacha, noshim b'svias roim, but we also broadened the scope and tried to analyze the concept, the very concept of mitzvahs asay shas man garama. So every night we count in Jewish language. As the Gemara says, Manocha Samach Vav, mitzvah lemimnei yoyim, mitzvah lemimnei shavui. We count days, we count weeks. Chlokes Hashonim, are these two mitzvahs or one? Rabbeinu Yerucham maintains two different mitzvahs. Bezman Abayis, we said two different brochas. One on Sefiras Yom and the other on Sefiras Shavuos. Rambam Sefiras clearly argues one mitzvah. A mitzvah which includes two different ma'asim, but it's still one mitzvah. Ben kach u ben kach doesn't really make a difference. Shnei inyonim, two different numbers, and numbers bear significance. Shiva Shavuos keneged ma, memtes yomim keneged ma. The one is mafurish in Zohar, the other only in Achronim. Kizvari and Zohar Parsha Sema, this week's Parsha, both say Shiva Shavuos, Sefiras Roim, coincide with Shiva Nekiyim, the Zava. A Zava, a Nida, needs to count 7 days. And the count of 7 days, Shiva Nekiyim, is part of the process of purity, of Tahara. It is the same Shiva Shavuos, Sefiras Roim. It is the process of purification, of achieving purity. As a preparation to Kabbalah Torah, we need to achieve Tahara. Taharas HaMachshava, Taharas HaLeiv, Taharas HaDibur, Shmiras Einayim. So the 7-week count coincides with the 7-day count of a Zova Lalois Metomar Tahara. What are the 49 days? Many Gedolim throughout the ages argued 49 days are connected Memches Dvorim Shetoyer and Yisben. And whenever I mention this Mahalach, I humorously ask, as if lahachas, why wouldn't Chazal say HaTorah Neknes be-memtes Dvorim, not memches? I could easily suggest another 2 or 3 things that would fit into the list. But no, this is just a joke. Whatever Chazal said is Beruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh should piamu belibam. And if they say memches, it's memches. Not one less, not one more. Memches. Aleim Elohisef umehem ein legroya. But I still don't want to put my drosha aside. The numbers are too close to be coincidental. So the Maharal is the first that says, yes, memtes yamei esvira coincide with memches vorim shetoyre nekneis bem. So what's the other day? Emen kerach ein Torah. Not very inspiring. Rabbi Sol Sananta, quoted in the Lev Eliyahu, I find the same Chidush Olim, they said, first 48 days, memches vorim shetoyre nekneis bem. The last day, chazorah. Doesn't appeal to me. Chazorah is not a concept which is diuraisa. It's a yeshivish idea. And if we already talk about Chazorah, it's a lopsided number. 1 day for 48 doesn't make sense. We need far more than 1 day to go over all the memches vorim shetoyre nekneis bem. So my feeling is this, and I shared this many times, Bal Peh B'chsav. At the end of Masechet Niddah, there's an amazing story of an encounter, a meeting between Rabbi Shua ben Chananya and Anshe Alexandria Shamitzrayim. It was a Q&A session, questions and answers. They asked the questions and Rabbi Shua gave the answers. One of the questions was, Ma yaseh udam v'yechkam? How could a person achieve wisdom? His answer was the obvious one. He probably said, well, what type of question is this? Yarba b'yeshiva v'yamayit b'schoira. Amru loy, harba osu ken v'loy also b'yodam. We know many members of our community that tried, and they got nowhere. Omer lohem yevakesh memisha choch mishalo. And the Gemara says, ho beloiho lo kaime. You need to daven, you need to pray. Nothing is taken for granted. Lasuk l'shmai tzali b'dehel chasem. Siyate dishmai. You need to daven. 48, Keneged 48. 48 for 48. Mem chizvam shatoinings. The last day is a reminder. Yevakesh memisha choch mishalo. And I don't mean to say start davening Erev Shavuos. No. You start davening before you embark on this journey, before day number 1. We're talking about symbolism, about symbolics. The last day is symbolic. It's a reminder the importance of tefillah. For us 48 days, our Yarba b'yeshiva v'yamayit b'schoira, day 49 is Yevakesh memi shachochma shelo. And this is a tefillah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu likes and cherishes and probably fulfills. Mea brochas, we say every day. No brocha is said with the passion and the fervor like brocha shniya, bechas kriya shema shel shachas, ahavas oilem aftonu, or ahavu rabba aftonu. Ovinu ovu rachamon, hamracheim racheim oleinu v'seim bilibeni bino, lohaven haska, lohaven, or lahaska, lishva v'las, lilmud rakhaim. No other brocha is said with such passion. How many times do we mention Rachmanis? Ovinu, our dear Father, Avu Rachamon, Hamarachem, Rachamoneinu. We don't use this passion in Birchas Refu'enu or Birchas Borech Oleinu, because the tefillah for Chochmah and for Torah is more important than any other. So those are the 49 days, 48. Mem chesvorim shatoin English mem 49. Tefillah for Ahav Rabo. Yevakesh memi shachoch mishaloin. So both Sefiras are to achieve the same goal. Har Sinai, Mamed Har Sinai. And the way I see it in my vision, Sefiras is like a ladder, a tall ladder. The foot of the ladder is in the mud of Eretz Mitzrayim, top of the ladder, top of Har Sinai. And this ladder has 48 rungs, or 49, it should have 49. And there's a half a meter between one rung and the other. It's tough. To climb this ladder is really an effort. But we try. And every day we go up another rung, and another, and once again another. And after climbing 48 runs, the person lifts his eyes, and he's terrorized. To his terrible dismay, he realizes that the top rung is missing. Someone just pulled it out. He can't proceed. Taking that leap, he might fall and die. He looks down, and he's even more terrified. It's far more difficult and dangerous going down than climbing up. And in total despair, he doesn't know what to do. And he cries out, does anybody hear me? Is there anyone up there? Could you give me a helping hand? Give me some rope. I'll never make it down. And I can't make it up. I'm so close and still so far. Please help. Mem ches yemei svira coincide with Mem ches vom shatoin in. It's tough, but we made the effort. One rung at a time. One and another, and yet another. We're almost at the top of the ladder. We're so close and yet so far. And then we cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. as Rabbi Shiur ben Hanani suggested to Anshe Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim. Yevakesh Mamisha Chacham Shalayim, we say, Rabboni Shalom, if you hear our voice, help us up. And then a person is Zoicha, Doidi Sholach Yodoi Min HaChoira V'Mayai Homu Loi. And he's Zoicha to Siyata D'Shmaya. Both Sefiras are towards the same goal, same destination, same objective. Preparation to Kabbalah Satayra. Sheva Shavuos is Avodas HaTahara, Memtes Yomem Kinyan Torah, culminating with Tefillah. Yevakesh Mamisha Chacham Shalayim said, let us all hope and daven. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us Siyata D'Shmaya. We should be Zocher to Kabbalah Satayra B'Shleimus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yiftach levavenu b'terosoi v'yosim b'libenu ahavosoi v'yerosoi. And we should be Zocher to Rachamei Shamayim and Yeshua Selomim. Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu b'meheru v'yomeinu Amen.